Hey everyone, in this video we're going to go over a basic to-do app in FastAPI as kind of a crash course on how to use FastAPI. Let's go ahead and get started. So I have a virtual environment started and loaded, and I'm going to go ahead and install FastAPI right now. So we do pip install FastAPI, and then in square brackets do all. And this gives us everything we need, including like a web server, everything else to actually run a FastAPI API. And so we'll do that to install everything. And now that's installed, we can go ahead and jump into the code and get started by writing this. So this will look very similar to Flask if you're familiar with Flask, but there's a few differences that we will get here with FastAPI. First thing I'll do is I'll import FastAPI. From there, I'll create an app instance of FastAPI. So app FastAPI with empty parentheses. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a model class for our to-dos. So first I'll do is create a class of to-do, passing in base model. And this base model will come from Pydantic, which is another Python class. Pydantic, import base model. And what Pydantic is this data validation library. And so it allows us to validate our data types, which we'll do plenty of as we get further into this tutorial. But for now, what we'll focus on is the base model. And a Pydantic model is just a class that defines its fields with annotated attributes. And so the ways to kind of define the different fields of our class. So in this case, our base model, what we'll have is we'll have a list of attributes. So we'll give it a title, it'll do colon, and we'll get the type of this field. In this case, a title will be a string, comma, not comma, just like that. And then we go to our next attribute, which will be completed. So you have a Boolean field to mark it as completed or as not completed. I will go in right here. Next, we'll have an ID. This will be an integer. Next, we'll have a category, which we'll add here in a second. This will be of type category, which we'll need to make here right now. But these are our fields. So this is how we create and define our to-do model. Above this to-do model, I'm going to create another class of category. And this will inherit from the enum library in Python. So from enum, import enum. And this will give us a way to set a couple of different choices for our categories right inside of here. So we'll do enum. And then we'll set the different choices. I'll give two different values, one of personal equals personal, and one of work equals work. So each to-do can either be a personal to-do or it can be one for work. And then that will be set in our category field on our to-do. And that is kind of like our basic setup. We have a model class to work with. That we're going to use this as well as a category for this model. We set our app up here with this line here. Now we're not going to actually mess with databases for this tutorial, just to keep things simple. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a dictionary, and this will be our kind of fake database for this tutorial. So I'm going to create a database of to-dos, and we'll have two to-dos to start. So first one will be a to-do. So we'll create a new instance of our to-do class, set our title equaling to like test1. We'll set a completed value equaling to true. We'll set an ID equaling to 0. We'll set a category equal to category dot, and then one of our categories, in this case, we'll do personal. Okay, so that is our to-do. We set our fields just like that. I'll put a comma. I'm going to add one more to-do here. So add a 1 and do another to-do. This one will have a title equal to test2, have it completed, set to false. I'll have an ID equaling 1 of a category equaling category, this time dot work. And there we go. So that is our basic to-dos that we'll use within our API. Now that we have all this set up, it's time to start creating routes and actually creating the different endpoints of our API. And if you're familiar with Flask, this will look kind of similar. We'll have a decorator, so we'll do an @ sign, and then we'll do app dot, in our method name, in this case we'll do a get. And this will go to our root, so it'll be just a slash, which will take us to the root of our API. Then we'll go ahead and create a function. This type will do def index, passing in no arguments, and then we're going to add some type hints. This will tell us kind of what it should return, and it will validate the return values to match what we want to match. So the way you can do type hints with Python for return values is you can do an arrow sign, and then you can go ahead and define the return values. So what I'm going to have return Actually, before I do this, let's go ahead and just write out the actual value we'll set. So what I'll do instead for as return is return a dictionary. It'll have a string value as the key here, and then the actual values will be our dictionary of all of our to-dos. So now with this information, let's go and set up our type hints to validate this. So we want to return a dictionary first, so we'll type dict, square brackets, and then we'll have a string value, and then we'll have our to-dos. So we'll have a string value, and then we'll have our to-dos. Our to-dos will be a dictionary because this right here is a dictionary. So then we'll have a type of dictionary. And then inside the dictionary, we will have an integer value and then our to-do. So we'll do our square brackets right here, and we'll do int, comma, to-do, and then close off all of those. So now looking at this value, we are returning a dictionary, which we are right here. Inside the dictionary, we'll have a string value, and then we'll have a dictionary value. A string value right here, and our dictionary value is our variable to-dos, which you can see is a dictionary. Our dictionary, inside of our dictionary, will have an integer value, and then we'll have the class to-do. Integer value, and then to-do. That's how our data validation is set up here. Okay. Now we can save that, and now we can go ahead and test out our first route. So to be able to test this out, what we need to do is we need to run our application. And FastAPI has something built in to make this easy. What we need to do is we need to go back to our terminal. We need to run uv acorn, like that, space, and then because our file is called main, we'll do main : app, and it's called app because that's what we named our app. So we named file name is main and our app name is app. So main : app, and then -- reload, so automatically reloads it on changes. We'll run that, and now we're getting a syntax error on line 13. Let's go ahead and double check that. Oh, I added a comma here. We don't want a comma. Rerun that and save it. Come back here, and now our application is running. And if you scroll up here, it's kind of a mess. We can see we have it running on this port right here. And so if we go ahead and take this value right here, and we just open that up, you see now what we get when we go to our root URL. It makes the GET request automatically because we're in our browser. What we're getting back all of our to-dos. So we correctly were able to return all of our to-dos using that index route. And because we're at the root of our API, it's going to automatically use our index route. Okay, perfect. So our first route is working as expected. Let's take this a step further, and let's use different paths to get one to-do. So what I want to be able to do, I want to be able to go to our route /todos/1, and this will hopefully load up one to-do. Right now it says not found, but we want this to load up the to-do with the ID of 1. So the way we'll add this is we'll add an additional route. So app.get /todos/ and then in curly braces, we'll put to-do_ID. And this will be kind of a placeholder saying we want to put an ID after our to-do. We'll create a function called get to-do by ID. And then automatically what FastAPI will do is it'll take this value and make it an argument for us. So we can pass it in as an argument inside of our function here. We can use type hints to determine what type this value should be. In this case, it's just an integer because it's just an ID. So we want to make sure we pass in a number and not a string. And then what we want to return is just a single to-do. So our return value will just be of class to-do. Now that we have that set, what we'll want to do is return the to-dos of the to-do ID, and this will return our ID. But let's go ahead and add a little extra validation here, and let's make sure that the ID exists before we try doing this, because this is going to fail if we put something that doesn't exist in our to-dos. So we'll do if to-do ID not in to-dos. So if it's not in the to-dos, then we're going to go ahead and raise an exception. So do raise HTTP exception like that, and this will be imported from FastAPI. So up here at the top, FastAPI, comma, HTTP exception. We'll raise this exception. We can pass in a status code. Our status code will be, in this case, if it doesn't exist, we'll do 404. So we'll do 404 Then we can pass in a detail. This will give us kind of a message. So we can say, pass in like an f string. We'll do ID. I'll say ID. The ID number does not exist. Now we save that. And now let's go ahead and go to our to-do with an ID at the route of 0 and the route of 1 and see if we can get both of our to-dos. So if I run this route again to 1, we now get test 2 completed false, ID 1 work category work. You can see here our ID here matches our ID up here. And looking at our code, ID of 1 here is test 2. So we correctly grab the ID of 1, passing in that route. Let's go ahead and now try it with 0 and see what happens. You'll see we get the first one, test 1. Now let's put something else like 3, and this does not exist. What we get is detail ID 3 does not exist. So now we're able to get error messages, and we can get our correct to-dos using this route. So now we have 2 routes created, one at the root and one at this other path right here, to get all and to get 1. Now there's one more get route I want to look at before we get on to other types of routes, and that is using query params. So if we were looking at our browser at an example route, what we'll have is we'd have to-dos add a question mark, and we'll do completed equals true, for example. Right now this is not found. Oh, this is the kind of route we want to see. We want to be able to pass in this query param of completed, and it'll check the completed value on our to-dos and return all of them that are set to true, or if we were to put false, it return all of them that are set to false. So now let's go ahead and try to implement this in our code. So we'll create another decorator for this route, so app.get, pass in a path. This path will be just to-dos, just like that, with nothing else added to it. Then we'll create a function, def, and we'll do query to-do by completed. And then now even though we don't have anything passed up into our path up here, we can still put arguments in our function. And these will all be automatically set as path parameters. So we can do a value of completed, and we'll set the type hint for this to be a bool, because we want this to only be a true or false value. We don't want any other value to be accepted here. And then we can also make it optional by doing none equaling none. So in this case, we can add that completed param, or we don't have to. By making it optional with that line right there. And then you want to go ahead and set our return value. So before we do that, let's go ahead and set how our return value is going to look. So we'll do something like return. It's going to be a dictionary of to-dos set to our filtered to-dos. So this is how we want to look. And we'll need to add some logic to actually add our filtered to-dos, but we'll do that here in a second. Let's add our type hints first. So our return value will be a dictionary. You see here a dictionary, and then inside dictionary we'll have a string value, and then we'll have a list of to-dos. So we can do dict, and then square brackets, and then inside this dictionary here we can do str for our string value, and then we can do a list. And now we can go a little more specific here and decide, okay, what's going to be in our list? Our list will be our to-do objects. So inside this list square brackets we can do to-do to make sure that we're returning a list of to-dos. Okay, now with that done, let's go ahead and add our logic to get our filtered to-dos. So we're just filtering it by that value on the to-do, and so we can use a list comprehension here to create a list that has filtered out everything that doesn't match what we passed in as our query param here, or as our path parameter here. So I'll do filtered params, or filtered to-dos, equals a list. I can do to-do for to-do in to-dos dot values if to-do dot complete. Is completed. So what we're doing here is we're using a list comprehension. So we're going to return a list. So this value at the very end will be a list. What we're going to do is we're going to loop over all of our to-dos and our to-dos dot values. So it's just going to grab this part over just our value. We're ignoring this part. We're looking at just our to-do here. And then we're checking if our to-do dot completed, to-do dot completed, make sure we fix that. Make sure it matches. If our to-do got completed, is equal to the value we're passing in our path parameter, then we're going to return it in this list. And at the very end, we're going to return a dictionary of to-dos with our filtered lists. Let's save that. Let's check our code here real quick. Looks like it's good. Let's go ahead and test it out. So we'll do completed equals true. And we get back a list of one to do, being our one that's completed, which is the ID of 0. Let's go look at false. And now we get the test 2, the one that was not completed. So now we're correctly filtering based on if it's completed or not completed using a path parameter instead of just a route. Perfect. Okay. So that covers the 3 different main ways of using get methods: just a normal path, path with an ID or with a value put in it, and then some query, and then some path parameters. And of course, like any API, we can do post, put, delete, hash, all those different methods as well. Let's go ahead and work through some examples with post, put, and delete to kind of finish out the basic logic we need for a basic API. So the next one we're going to add is a post. Well, this will be for if we want to create a new to-do. So do app.post, and the route will be just to-dos, like that. Or really, we could just do just an empty, the root path we want. Either one's fine. Then we'll do a function of create to do, and what we're going to pass in is going to be a to do. So we'll have a to do set to do. Now we have passing our to do. We want to go ahead and set our return value. So this will be set to just a dictionary. Well, I guess once again, let's go and just type it out here first so that makes sense. So we're going to return a dictionary of to-dos, or with, I guess, to do with our created to do, like that. So our return value here is going to be a dictionary with a string value and then a to-do value. Oops, make sure it's a capital T, to do. Now let's go ahead and add the logic to actually create our to-do. So this will be pretty simple. All we're going to do is in our to-do, since we're having just a fake database, we're creating our to-dos dictionary, take our to-do.id, and set that value equal to our to-do. So we're just adding this additional to-do to our dictionary. But let's also add another validation check to make sure that it's not already in there. So if to-do.id in our to-do, so it's already there, then let's go ahead and just raise an HTTP exception again, passing in a status code equal to 400, and a detail will equal ID. Let's do it a string again. ID to-do.id already exists, and there we go. Let's save this. Okay, and now we go ahead and test out this route. Now, because this is a post request, I'm going to use an API client to test this route out. I have Insomnia right here ready to go, and I already have this route set, and we have some JSON here ready to go. Let's change the name, post test. So we have a title, our completed value set to false, an ID, and our categories. This is all the data we need to pass in for to do. If I click send, we get a OK to our OK, and it sends back our to-do object we created. Now, as a quick test, if this is working, let's go ahead and change this to a get and send this. And now you'll see, instead of getting just 2 to-dos, we have 3. We have a 1 for 0, 1 of ID of 1, 1 of ID of 3. I guess I skipped 2, but that's fine. It still works. You can see that we have this additional to-do added now to our list. So we did, in fact, we're able to add a to-do using the post request. Okay, so let's go ahead and now build out that put route. So we'll do an app.put, passing in the route, and the route will be /todos/an ID again, so to-do _ ID, and then we'll create a class or a function for this. So def update to do. Once again, we'll pass in our argument there, and our return value will be just the to do colon the to do. So that is what we're going to pass in. And then I'm also going to add one more additional argument, to do colon type of to do. So we want to have an argument here of the to do values, and this will be the dictionary values we pass in to our put request. So we'll have a JSON body, and this to do value will be in our JSON body. So what we're going to do is to update the to do, we are going to just do to dos and then get the to-do underscore ID. So we're getting the ID from our URL. Whatever ID we pass in here, we're set this to-do equal to the to-do data we pass into our JSON body. And then we'll return that to-do at the very end. Let's go ahead and test this out real quick. So I'll go back into Insomnia. Let's make a put request. Not a patch, put. Let's go into our JSON. And we have a JSON set up already, it looks like. So we have an ID of 1. So we go to slash to-dos slash 1. An ID of 1, title of test 2. We'll set completed to true this time. And we'll set the category to work. We'll send this. And now we're getting back our data with our completed updated. Let's now do a get at the root. And now both our to-dos are set to true. So we successfully updated our second one to also be completed. Okay, so that's how we add a put request. And of course, we could do a similar thing for a patch, but in this case, we're not going to worry about that. Let's go ahead and add one additional route. This will go over how to create a delete request. So we'll do an app.delete, and it'll have a route, once again, to-dos slash to-do underscore ID. And then we'll create a function. So def delete to-do, and then we'll have a to-do ID as the argument. This is going to be set to int. And then once again, we'll have the same return value as always. So we'll have just a dictionary, a string of to-do, and then we'll have our to-do that we deleted. And I forgot to add this on our update to-do. Let's add this here as well. So dictionary, string, and then a to-do as what we're returning there. But back to our delete here. First, we're going to check if it exists. So if to-do underscore ID not in to-dos. So if it doesn't exist, we're going to raise an HTTP exception of a status code of equaling to 404 and a detail equaling ID f string again. This will be an ID to do underscore ID does not exist. And then if it does exist, we can go ahead and add the logic to delete it. So we can do to do equals to do's dot pop to do by the ID, so to do underscore ID. And then we'll return a dictionary string of to do with the actual to do that we removed. So this dot pop function will just take it out of it and then return it. So we take it out of our dictionary and then return it to this variable so we can return it at the bottom of the function. Let's go ahead and save this and run this now. So we'll go to a delete and we'll go to slash to-dos slash 1. Let's go ahead and now try to delete that request. We get a 1, returns the one that we deleted. Let's now make a get and see if it's gone. And it is gone. So now we only have one to do in our list here, or in our dictionary. So we did correctly delete one of them. So that is really it. That went over all the different methods: the get, post, put, and then delete. That covers kind of how you need all the things you need. We have our basic route here. We have a route with a path variable added in. We have a get with path parameters by just passing in arguments into our function here that are not in our path for the URL. A post, and then for post put, you just notice that we have arguments. They're not in our path here, but they're also not path parameters. The reason for that is for post and put, it puts it automatically into the JSON body. So our to-do is automatically, in both these cases, in the JSON body here. And our put, we have the to-do ID, this argument that's coming from our URL, but then our to-do here is coming into the JSON body because it's not in the URL. So hopefully that makes sense. There is a lot of other features with FastAPI, but this is kind of a good starting point. The last thing I want to go over before I end this tutorial is documentation. So by default, you get access to some docs for your API. So I go to slash docs, it builds up the Swagger UI for it. And it kind of already gives you some things here. It gives you all the different methods we have, our get method here, a get method here, our post method right there, our put, our delete, and then our query by the parameters. We could add more details. Like right now, there's no title. It doesn't really have many details here. So let's go ahead back to your API and add some more details to populate this with a few more different things. And this is just a very beginning kind of like a surface level what we can add. There's much more you can add by going through documentation. But as a starting point, we can add a title by going into our FastAPI instance here and adding a title to that equal to like to do app. We can add a description for it as well. We do description equaling our basic to do app. We can also add a version number if we wanted to. So version equaling 0.0.1. I save this now and go back to my documentation and reload. Now all of our information up here has been updated. To do app being our title, our basic to do app as a description, and you can see our version right there. Okay, perfect. So now we update our title. Let's look at our schemas here. We can update some things here. It just tells you our different values. That's all. It doesn't give us any more information. But if we add a docstring to our class here, so just by triple quotations and then put something inside the triple quotations, like category for a to do, and save that, come back here and refresh. Now you'll notice we have a little description for our schema here, and we could do it for any of these other ones as well, but it all works the same way. You just add a docstring to do that. So that's just a kind of a quick way to add a few more details to kind of give you some descriptions for your different routes. Again, you can go to documentation and find many more ways you can update this docs, but it is nice to have kind of a default sort of setup here that you can kind of look at right away and get some data on how to use your API without too much code to set it up. But that is where we're going to end this tutorial. All the code will be in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.